Let's talk a little outside Chicago politics for a second with Pat Pfingsten from the Illinoize. Spell it and tell people how to get it.
TheIllinoize.com, ILLINOIZE. Google it, find us, get your newsletter in your inbox every day.
How do we do downstate? Any ideas?
So it's downstate, and actually it feels like the election last night was just kind of this whole lesson in contradictions. The Mike Bost race against Darren Bailey in far southern Illinois. Bost had the endorsement of President Trump, which does not, sound like it would help someone in Cook County or the suburbs, but in southern Illinois, that was treated as essentially the golden goose. But Darren Bailey is such a well-known commodity that and has such a built-in network of supporters that
Chumbalone.
That
Sorry,
was Darren. That was Darren.
Patrick.
He just jumped in there.
Never mind, Steve.
Yeah.
Chumbalone.
Yeah.
Chumbalone. Come on, man. Come on.
Don't get me started. So it turned out to be a super close race, and actually the Associated Press still hasn't called it for Bost yet. It's still within a couple of thousand votes. I'm waiting on a couple of those really deep South counties that don't put their results out on the internet yet. Still haven't completely reported.
Do they not get the internet in those counties?
Well, I mean, there's probably a discussion to be had about, fiber and indoor plumbing. But there are still counties in far southern Illinois that do not post their election results publicly on the internet.
And what are we talking? 3,000-4,000 vote difference in that race?
My numbers aren't pulling up.
I think it was about 3 when we signed up.
3,000.
Yeah, it was 3,000 or 4,000 last I checked, and it's probably enough that Bost will be fine. But and Bailey has conceded, so it's not like he's gonna, and a concession doesn't have any actual legal meaning, but it it means essentially a promise that someone's not going to let go challenge an election result.
So what happens to Darren Bailey now? Does he keep running for things? Does he become the Oberweis of the South, or what's he going to do?
Darren Bailey thinks he is trying to be nice. Should I be nice?
You don't have to be nice. You're on the Steve Cochran Show. Tell the truth.
There are few politicians in the history of downstate politics, at least in recent years, with the kind of ego of Darren Bailey.
Mm-hmm.
And he has, I swear to God, a belief that he has been called by God to do these things.
Really?
And
God could have had a wrong number.
and I don't think he goes away. I don't think he's gotten the message, because every time he's lost, it's someone else's fault. But he's now lost 2 big races in a row,
right?
And I don't think he's going away.
So it is an ego thing then.
Yeah, and the voters there.
You need me.
The voters there made a smart choice. Bost has been in Congress. Bost has some seniority, has some good committee positions, and is a verified conservative. And if you love Trump, Bost sided Trump most of the time. So they made the right choice if you're voting for a Republican and you believe you're a conservative. Jane.
I want to talk about voter turnout, because in the Chicagoland area, 20%-ish. What was it like downstate?
It's bad. It's bad everywhere. I mean, it's not a problem that's exclusive to the city or downstate. I mean, it's a problem with the extremes of our politics. It's the problems with the gerrymandering of our districts that make them so completely uncompetitive that only the extremes get to choose their candidates. What is Senate District 20 in the city, where you pick the most uber liberal progressive candidate you can find, is the opposite in choose your downstate Senate race, 53 or 37 yesterday, where they're picking who looks to be the most conservative, out there, or anything in Southern Illinois.
Well, yeah, it's the candidates picking the voters, not the voters picking the candidates, which is more than a cliche. It's a fact when it comes to gerrymandering. Now, I had Tom pull some numbers here because Max Bever told us yesterday that what's Max's title, Nick? Grand Poobah of Elections?
I mean, he's the
That's good.
Director of Public Information for voting. Okay.
Yeah, Chicago Board of Elections.
And he said, look, as the presidential race year goes, the candidates and all that, so goes turnout. So let's go back to 2008. 2008, you may remember a young Barack Obama versus a John McCain. And the election itself, 71%, I should say, so big turnout. But for the primary election, 41%. 41% turned out. That was 2008. But you go to 2012, it's Obama going for a second term versus Romney. 23% turnout.
Wow.
Fast forward to 16, you got the hot race, right? You got Trump and Hillary.
Yep.
And the primary turnout was 47%. So, in other words, Max, yeah, you know what you're talking about because people are not excited about either one of these candidates, and it had an impact on turnout. Doesn't mean it's okay for you not to vote. It just means that Max was correct.
No, it's certainly driven by presidential primaries. I mean, if you look 4 years ago statewide, there were something like 500 and change thousand votes for the Republican presidential primary when Donald Trump was unopposed. Of course, 2020, the world was starting to end on primary day, so it was, I think it was a little bit extra deflated, but it wasn't that far off from even like 2004 when George W. Bush was unopposed. So essentially the unopposed presidential primaries clearly drive turnout down. And then that 2008 number might be a little bit inflated because remember we moved our primary all the way up to like February 1st so that Obama would win Illinois early. So clearly if we're doing that primary earlier, Obama had a big role in that, of course.
Stick around for a second more with Mr. Pfingsten in a moment. Take a brief nap in between. You sound even more tired than you are. It's the Grand Poobah of the Illinoize, Illinoize. Ask for it by name. And we'll get Nick and Jane in here with Patrick DeGusum as well. On a Big 89 WLS, Steve Cochran still to come on this show. More Pfingsten in just a moment. Julie Bacchi after 7, Steve Burness after 7:30, Bill F. after 8, and Barbara McQuaid after 8:30. Barbara McQuaid, author and NBC and MSNBC commentator, and she's talking about something Ring with you and me and everybody that's a grown-up or pretends they are. Attack from within, how disinformation is sabotaging America. That whole, I don't know what to believe.
I know it. I think it's going to be a great topic, and I'm glad that you wrote a book about it.
6:53, we go back to Patrick Pfingsten, the boss, the founder, the main guy, the hired hitman at the Illinoize. Nick.
Patrick, I'm curious if you found anything down there out of place or any upsets or any unusual race that didn't pan out. The reason I asked here, we had Mary Flowers. You remember her. She's been in state politics since the 80s. She was always one to show up at every bill signing, whether she had something to do with it or not, because she really liked the FaceTime on TV. But she lost, and I was surprised at that. Was there any surprising races downstate?
Well, you shouldn't be surprised at the fact that Mary Flowers lost.
Do tell.
Because Chris Welch, the House Speaker, and Democrats put more than $1.5 million into the campaign of Michael Crawford to beat Flowers. Flowers is a controversial figure within Democratic politics. She's been in the House since Steve was still young. And that,
that was unnecessary, but true.
Great. I loved it.
And it was, but she landed herself in some hot water last year. She found herself kicked out of House Democratic leadership. They banned her from House Democratic caucus meetings because she said some untoward things to some staffers, and then there's kind of been a pattern of her being a little difficult to work with, and Chris Welch essentially said, I don't want to deal with her anymore. So he opened the floodgates to beat her and spend $1.5 million to do it. And he was trying to do the same with another state rep from the South Side, Cyril Nichols, but Nichols wasn't the same sort of institution that Flowers was. So Nichols ended up backing out of his race, but Flowers stuck it out and just couldn't overcome the wave of money in that race.
Interesting.
Jane.
Well, I always wanted to know any of the big upsets that happened downstate that we didn't really get the news on.
And there could be no.
Yeah,
because
because I feel like a lot of the incumbents just stayed in.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there an upset that stands out?
I don't know that there are actually a ton of upsets. I mean, especially downstate, there were some things we were watching that maybe we were surprised at the distance between some of the candidates.
Mm-hmm.
The Illinois Education Association, the big teachers union, came in and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and beat a couple of the Freedom Caucus members in the legislature. A guy named Blaine Willauer from around Effingham, and another named Adam Niemerg from down in that southeastern Illinois neck of the woods. The Niemerg race was wild. It was a double write-in race that we could break down for an hour. But
is that of the same family that owns the chicken restaurant? The steakhouse, Niemerg's?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Nick's just hungry.
They gotta be.
Never mind.
Gotta
He's
be.
thinking about dinner.
So Niemerg's in Effingham are like Johnson's anywhere else. It's a very, very common, German name as a guy with a funny German name. They all stick out. So, there was a thought that, the IEA and the Federation of Teachers that came in and spent a bunch of money on these pro-union Republicans, and they really targeted these Freedom Caucus Republicans that hate the teachers unions, that maybe they would kind of put the Freedom Caucus in its place, and instead it looks like the Freedom Caucus members are going to absolutely just cruise to re-election. So not a good night for hundreds of thousands of dollars of teachers union money that was spent in those downstate.
CTU here put a bunch of money behind the Chicago Home Initiative, and that's lost. So that's that's going to create some meetings behind the scenes, and also it's going to hurt Stacey Davis Gates demanding $50 billion. Which of course we were more than happy to give her,
Right,
because it was such a sensible request. All right, Pat Pfingsten, you can go to bed now, but tell us again, how do we get the Illinoize?
Go to theillinoize.com, ILLINOIZE, and we put out a newsletter every day, have a whole bunch of content that we put out, and try and talk about politics from each end of the state as effectively and decently and informatively as possible.
We appreciate.
He can't take a nap. He can't go to bed. He's got to write the content.
Oh, he does?
Yes.
No, this morning's newsletter is already out. I stayed up late to do that, and then but there's a toddler who's going to wake up in the next 30 minutes. So we'll see if we can find a nap today.
Well, I hope it's yours. Otherwise, the house has some splaining to do.
Who's this toddler?
Right. Are we babysitting? Thank you, man. And good to know what's going on south of I-80. In the meantime, Jane and I were talking, and Nick, there was a lot of talk about the no commitment or the not Biden vote on the Democrat side in the Minnesota primary. Last night, we saw it again and again. We saw it here in Illinois. Illinois Republicans, about 20% of the vote went not to Trump.
Right.
So if you've got 20% of the math in a tight race in November not going to Biden or not going to Trump just based on your party, what's going to happen to those votes? Are they no-shows?
Right. So
does it also encourage a third party to step up? That kind of thing.
I mean, and it makes me wonder, is that simply, are those protest votes? Or were some people really not educated in that they didn't know that Nikki Haley was out? Because Nikki Haley got 14%.
Steve said some people didn't know that she was out. But my question was, do people vote for DeSantis still on there, Christie still on there? Nikki Haley got, 14% of the vote? Right. She's not even running anymore. Right. Yeah, so
I don't know.
They didn't know she was out, or that's a protest vote?
America is no longer in the top 20 of happiest places in the world.
That's not surprising.
No.
That's a great headline after the last topic.
Top 20 happiest countries in the world. We didn't make the list. How about people being happy at work? Julie Balke will talk about that coming up. I'll probably drop into one of my rants about not working at home.
Well, if you're not happy, get a new job.
There's lots of them out there still. Absolutely.